This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Iran confirms it will break the 2015 nuclear deal and continue enriching uranium beyond allowed limits. Tunisians react to a government ban on the Muslim niqab, with many backing the government's efforts to improve security. And UN and Libyan authorities call for the closure of migrant centers across Libya as the death toll from an airstrike on a detention center reaches 53. Hello and a very warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. Also coming up this half hour. China now has the world's highest tally of heritage sites, with UNESCO's addition of the Liangzhu bird sanctuaries. And in sports, Ugandans react to the Cranes' exit from the Africa Cup of Nations after a defeat by Senegal. We begin in the Gulf, where a supertanker sailing under the United Kingdom's flag has been deemed safe and well by British authorities. This after it was stopped in the Gulf on Saturday. Now, the vessel was stopped as part of routine procedures. This comes after an Iranian military commander threatened on Friday to seize a British ship in retaliation for the capture of an Iranian oil tanker in Gibraltar. Tensions have been high in the Gulf region following last month's attacks on vessels near the Strait of Hormuz. Meanwhile, Iran has confirmed it will break the 2015 nuclear deal and continue enriching uranium beyond what was allowed. Senior officials partly blamed Europe for failing to keep the agreement alive.
What President Rouhani clearly stated on Wednesday and is unanimously agreed upon by every component of the establishment will undoubtedly be carried out. In the first step we took, we exceeded the 300-kilogram stockpile of enriched uranium, and we will take the second step on July the 7th. The level of uranium enrichment will not remain at 3.67%. It will increase to any amount that we need for our peaceful nuclear activities.
Still, the government's senior advisor insists Tehran doesn't want to withdraw from the deal. Sunday is Iran's deadline for Europe to offer relief from American sanctions and save the nuclear agreement. The International Atomic Energy Agency will hold a special meeting next week. The World Food Programme has described the Democratic Republic of Congo as the world's second largest hunger crisis after Yemen. The UN agency says 13 million Congolese are food insecure. The crisis has been compounded by ethnic violence in the northeast of the country, where thousands have been forced to flee their homes. CGTN's Chris Ochambringa has more from Kinshasa.
Congolese displaced by ethnic violence adjust to a new life at a camp in Ituri province. Thousands of them fled their homes in Jugu territory after clashes broke out between the Hema and Lendu communities last month. Humanitarian agencies have scaled up their operations to support them.
We have more than 300,000 people displaced. There is a mix of intervention in terms of in-kind donations. So we are bringing commodity and food to the people. Also cash, so we give them cash to access product in the market.
The ethnic conflict in Ituri province has worsened the DRC's food insecurity. The World Food Programme says millions of people are struggling to get food across the country.
DRC represents worldwide the second largest crisis in the world. We have more than 13 million people that are food insecure, and you also may consider that more of 5.8 children and women are suffering from acute malnutrition in the country.
Local authorities say the conflict has claimed 160 lives. An official from President Tshisekedi's party says the government is doing all it can to improve the situation.
The president took his team up to Ituri. He went to Bunia and to other places in the region to reassure the people that his government is committing to bring about change. What kind of change? Improve the security situation in those places. And to do so, of course, you need to make sure that your own troops are well prepared to do the job.
President Tshisekedi described the ethnic conflict as attempted genocide and ordered a large-scale operation against the militias. The government hopes the restoration of peace will enable the displaced people to return to their homes to fend for themselves. Hundreds of people displaced by the ethnic conflict have fled to neighboring Uganda. The crisis has occurred as Ituri province struggles to contain the country's worst Ebola outbreak. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Tunisian authorities say the state of emergency decreed in 2015 has once again been extended. This, of course, since the country continues to face imminent terror threats. The Tunisian Prime Minister Youssef Chahed on Friday banned the niqab in public institutions, citing security reasons. The Muslim woman's veil covers the entire face except the eyes and can potentially be used as a disguise or to escape justice. CGTN's Adnan Chouachi has the details.
Tunisian President Beji Qaid Sibsi decided to extend the state of emergency by 1 month throughout the country. This decision was made after consultation with the Prime Minister and Speaker of the House of People's Representatives.
There was a disagreement between the government and some parliamentarians on the constitutionality of the state of emergency, but I took the decision.
The National Security Council approved the president's decision following 2 suicide attacks in downtown Tunis and after a wanted terrorist wearing an explosive belt was shot dead by police in a popular neighborhood. Authorities said ISIL terrorist cells, which operated in Tunis, had close ties to terrorists in conflict zones.
The attacks were planned abroad, and the order was given by other terrorists who are based in Syria, Iraq, and Libya to prove that they still exist. However, they failed to destabilize our security forces and plunged Tunisia into chaos.
Tunisian Premier Youssef Chahed signed a decree banning the niqab face cover at government buildings and public facilities. The Premier's advisors cited security reasons. Islamic scholars say the decision could cause unrest in the country.
The decision could divide the public opinion because Tunisia is a Muslim society. Those who reject the ban have all the legal and constitutional means to protest peacefully. Tunisia must remain united at this difficult period.
Tunisia has reinforced security on border regions with Libya and Algeria to prevent the illegal entry of Tunisian or foreign militants. Dozens of suspects were arrested in connection with the bombings on Habib Bourguiba Avenue. Thousands of policemen have been deployed across Tunisia to secure vital facilities, embassies, tourist sites and beach resorts. The head of state and the country's premier have called on Tunisians to trust their military and security institutions and to continue their daily activities normally during this state of emergency. Adnan Chouachi, CGTN, Tunis.
Well, some Tunisians say they hope the ban on the niqab is a temporary measure as the government counters threats posed by militancy. Let's take a listen.
I think that the problem lies here. If we start to make decisions that limit the freedom of individuals for security reasons, it may be worse in the future. We will be setting a bad precedent. There is no reason why the state should prohibit any woman from wearing the full veil.
They have the right to prohibit the niqab, given the situation we are currently witnessing. But in the end, it remains an individual freedom. I'm neither for nor against the ban. If it is compromising our security, then let them ban it.
It's for our safety. If someone wears a full veil, you are no longer able to identify them, so it's normal that it's forbidden, at least in public institutions.
We must not sacrifice one part of freedom for security. Based on the same principle, we can think about banning the wearing of the veil. I don't know why the woman has to make sacrifices every time there are security measures to be taken.
Let's move to Libya now, where authorities continue to call for an independent investigation into an airstrike on a migrant center in the outskirts of the capital, Tripoli. The toll from Tuesday's hit rose to 53 dead, with more than 130 injured. This according to the UN aid agencies. The organizations are pressing for the closure of all such facilities in the country as warring parties refuse to back down from a raging conflict. CGTN's Asta Tal reports.
The United Nations says they're still not able to verify who is responsible for this week's airstrike that hit a migrant detention center on the outskirts of Tripoli, even as the Libyan UN-backed government pointed fingers at a foreign nation.
There needs to be this independent investigation. What we can say is at this point there does need to be greater efforts, far greater efforts from the international community, particularly amongst those states that have leverage over the warring parties, to bring an end to the violence, to bring them together to the negotiating table and to establish a political dialogue that brings an end to these clashes.
Reiterating its appeal for the closure of such facilities in Libya, they say that the survivors of the ordeal remain severely traumatized. The Libyan government has also voiced readiness to close such migrant centers. Children are said to have been among the fatalities at the Taj Ura site.
53 migrants are confirmed dead, among them 6 children, following Tuesday's airstrike on the Tajura detention center. Over 130 people were injured. The more than 600 migrants detained at Tajura represented at least 17 different nationalities, mainly African.
Reiterate once again that the coordinates of these detention centers in Tripoli are well known to both sides of the conflict, and this was a preventable tragedy that never should have happened.
Reports that guards had fired on migrants trying to flee remain unverified. About 350 migrants are still sheltering at the center. The facility initially held approximately 600 people. According to authorities, 3,300 migrants and refugees are detained inside and around Tripoli. In addition to the Taj Ura tragedy, the International Organization for Migration also confirmed that more than 80 migrants are feared drowned after their boat capsized while trying to reach Europe from the Libyan port of Zuwara.
The survivors told IOM staff that the inflatable boat carrying 86 people, including 4 women and 2 children, left Zuwara around 6 a.m. on 1st of July. A few hours later, the boat began to leak and capsized due to the confusion and frantic movements of dozens of people on board.
So far this year, the UN Migration Agency has reported 426 people have drowned while attempting to reach Europe through the central Mediterranean route. About 3,750 have been returned to detention, where they remain at risk as clashes continue to rage in Libya's capital, Tripoli. Asta Tal, CGTN.
Okay, and now time for a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. China now has the world's highest tally of heritage sites with UNESCO's edition of Yangju Bird Sanctuary. And the Ethiopian government considers opening up the mobile telecommunications market to private investors.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Let's now head to Niger, where leaders from African states will formally launch the Continental Free Trade Area on the 7th of July in Niger's capital, Niamey. Nigeria was one of the countries which did not sign the trade treaty last March, but it is set to do so alongside Benin at the Niamey summit. That effectively leaves Eritrea as the only African state not to have assented to the free trade area. CGTN's Raman Young is in Niamey with a preview on how the deal will work.
Unlike some other continental-level agreements like the Yamoussoukro decision, which was designed to open up African skies, but pun not intended, didn't take off, the Continental Free Trade Area has come to life really fast, even by AU standards. It's literally taken the better part of a year and a half from the signing of the treaty to moving towards the operational phase of the agreement. Now, with Nigeria and Benin to sign the treaty on the 7th of July, the deal will effectively have 54 signatories, all but one country in Africa, and 26 of those have or will, like Gabon for instance, deposit the instruments of ratification. As home to Africa's biggest economy and its biggest population, Nigeria did take a bit of time to come around.
See, the internal mobilization has already occurred, and this is a difference. And I think, in fact, the world should, or Africans should recognize and appreciate what happened, because it's still going to be signed within the time frame, specified, and with the full support of 200 million people saying, yes, we need it, and not like the president signed it and is trying to impose it on them.
Agreeing to the treaty, however, is just the easy part. Now comes the hard-fought negotiations over tariffs, exclusions, and rules of origin.
One, we need to give time for the member states to liaise with the business people to sensitize them about the emerging opportunities in the market. And they also needed to produce trade documents and distribute them across the national territories. Then we're also going to call for a meeting of Director Generals of Customs to come and look at the state of preparedness. That's the first level. The second level is for us, as the African Continental Free Trade Area Interim Secretariat, to work with the regional economic communities to come up with a framework of collaboration, because the African territory is very, very big.
Now, the rules of origin threshold varies from one sector of goods to the next, but broadly speaking, an item needs to have at least 80% of its value added within the continent in order to qualify for preferential tariffs within the CFTA.
And we're now looking at what level of, by how much, in the simple person's terms, what percentage of the good should have been produced on the continent for us to sort of allow it to move around the continent. So we don't want, say, 90% of a good is produced in China and 10% is just a stamp that is done in Africa and then you sort of put it into the global African market. No. So where there is a threshold of, it has to be 80-85% that is done on the continent for us to be able to sort of take it forward and put it into the CFTA basket. At
least 7 different countries, including Kenya, Ethiopia, Eswatini, Senegal and Ghana, had also put in their bids, their offers to host the CFTA Secretariat. When I asked the Commissioner for Trade at the AU Commission if Ghana was agreed to as the host at the July 5th ministerial meeting, this was his response.
Announcement tomorrow. I don't know.
Albert Muchanga there, holding his cards close to his chest. Now, in the wake of the summit in Niamey, member states that will have ratified this will now be able to trade under CFTA rules by the 1st of July 2020. Beyond that, however, there's more. Negotiations on competition policy, that has to be done in 2020. And thereafter, talks on how to set up a continental customs union and a continental single market over the medium term. Raman Yang, CGTN, Niamey, Niger.
Now let's head to Ethiopia, where the government is considering opening up the mobile telecommunications market to private investors. Currently, state-owned Ethio Telecom is the sole operator in the Horn of Africa nation. Steps to have private companies compete with the government-owned provider are part of reforms which were initiated by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. Ahmed has promised to fully or partially privatize key government institutions like energy, the railway, sugar manufacturing and telecommunications sectors.
The key decision in terms of market structure is one, to separate telecom into 2 divisions, and second, to allow 2 additional operators. So the market structure generally would have what you call a 2+1 formula. Telecom would have 1 partner in terms of JV or selling its share, but there will be 2 additional operators who would be allowed to start a greenfield operation in Ethiopia. We plan to finalize the entire process of privatization and liberalization of the sector between now and the first quarter of 2020.
Another World Heritage Site for China. A UNESCO committee has today added the archaeological ruins of Liangzhu to the list. The announcement comes after Chinese bird sanctuaries along the coast of the Yellow Sea made the list, giving China the world's highest tally with 55 heritage sites. Now let's check out the latest edition, the ancient city in eastern China's Zhejiang province.
I declare the draft decision 43-8B.15 adopted.
And coming up in your sports news, up next. Ugandans react to the Cranes' exit from the Africa Cup of Nations after a defeat by Senegal.
Africa, where champions are made, records are broken, legends are born. We're there for every goal, for every knockout, for every step of the way. Match Point, only on CGTN.